Snow flurried softly against the glass as Claire Bennett wiped down the last table at Penny's diner. Christmas music hummed from a dusty wall radio, cheerful and hollow in the nearly empty room. She paused, watching a couple outside walk hand in hand under the glow of downtown Asheville's twinkling streetlights. They laughed. She couldn't hear them, but she didn't need to. That kind of laugh, the kind that comes easy when someone's waiting for you, it was foreign to her now. Claire pressed her cloth harder against the tabletop jaw tight. The same loneliness had crept in for the last 5 Christmases, but this year it had company shame. She was 37, lived in a rented 1-bedroom above a consignment shop, and worked 2 jobs just to stay ahead of the heating bill. And now her mother's latest voicemail played in her head on a loop. "Claire, honey, your sister's bringing Michael again, and they just got back from Paris. Can you believe that your cousin Lacey's fiancé is flying in from Denver? And well, I thought maybe this year you'd bring someone too, just someone nice. Doesn't have to be serious." Claire had deleted the message, but it echoed anyway. She flipped the closed sign and locked the door, her reflection staring back at her tired eyes, hair pulled up in a messy knot apron still stained with coffee. Not glamorous, not even festive. Inside, Penny's old cat let out a slow meow from his perch near the register. Claire bent down to scratch behind his ears. "It's just you and me again, huh?" she whispered. "Family Christmas where every conversation is about what you don't have." The cat blinked, unimpressed. She stood up, grabbed her coat, and stepped out into the icy night. As she turned the corner past the bookstore, her phone buzzed. Another message from Sophie. "Hey, just wanted to confirm you're still coming, right? Mom's making that weird green bean thing again. Also, bring wine. And if you're bringing anyone, I need to know for seating." Claire's thumb hovered over the screen. Then instead of answering, she opened a blank message and typed one word, "yes." And then after a pause, "His name is James." She hit send before she could take it back. Her breath clouded in the air as the lie settled on her shoulders like snow. It wasn't the first time she'd lied to keep her dignity intact, but this one had momentum. A name, a seat at the table, a fiction waiting to be filled. She walked faster, ignoring the tight pull in her chest. She passed couples window-shopping friends laughing near the coffee shop, the echo of other people's warmth brushing past her like wind. She didn't expect to speak the thought aloud, but she did. Where does someone even find a fake boyfriend? And then, as if plucked straight from a holiday special written by someone with a dark sense of humor, a voice answered. "I could be him." Claire spun around. The man stood just off the sidewalk beneath the soft glow of a lamppost. Tall mid-40s maybe, in a charcoal coat and gray scarf. His dark hair was tousled slightly by the wind. He didn't smile. He didn't look smug or charming. Just calm. Still. Claire blinked. "Excuse me, you just said you were looking for a fake boyfriend." He took a step forward, hands in his pockets. "I'm offering." She scoffed, unsure whether to laugh or call someone. "You were eavesdropping." "No," he said mildly. "You were talking to yourself, loudly." She crossed her arms. "You're serious?" He nodded once. Claire shook her head. "That's ridiculous. Is it?" "Yes. Completely." He tilted his head, eyes steady. "Then why haven't you walked away yet?" Claire opened her mouth, then closed it. The street felt suddenly quieter. Behind her, the cafe's warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. His coat looked expensive, his shoes even more so. But he didn't radiate the kind of sleek confidence Asheville's few tech transplants usually wore like a badge. "You don't know me," she said, voice lower now. "I could be anyone." "And I could be worse," he replied. "But I'm not. My name's James. I live 3 blocks from here. You work at Penny's. We've passed each other at least a dozen times." I've had your coffee. Claire's chest tightened. She studied him. She did remember someone like him, quiet, polite, always left a good tip. She'd just never looked. She cleared her throat. Look, I was joking. No, you weren't. Well, I didn't mean for anyone to answer. James glanced up at the street lamp. Tell you what, you hire me. One night. Family Christmas, I'll smile, not hold your hand if you want. No strings, no expectations. $5. Claire let out a laugh, dry and tired. You'd do that for $5. He gave the faintest smile. I think we both know it's not about the money. She stared at him, unsure if she felt amused or cornered by her own loneliness. And what's in it for you? His eyes softened just barely. Maybe I just like helping people disappear into something good for a little while. Claire looked away. Everything in her life lately had been survival. This was absurd, unbelievable, but also something else. Fine, she said more to herself than to him. $5. One night. James extended his hand. Deal. She hesitated, then shook it. His hand was warm, steady, and something about that unsettled her more than anything else. He pulled a small notebook from his coat pocket. We'll need a backstory, how long we've been together, where we met. First date. You'll need to coach me on your family. Claire blinked. You're really into this. If we're going to lie, he said, glancing up, we should do it, convincingly. She stared at him for another beat, then exhaled. All right. I work the breakfast shift. Meet me at Penny's tomorrow before 10. I get off at noon. He nodded. I'll be there. Claire turned, walking toward her apartment, not daring to look back. Her heart raced. Her skin prickled from the cold and something else. She had no idea what she'd just stepped into. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Claire stood in front of the diner's bathroom mirror, hands gripping the chipped porcelain sink. She stared at her reflection like it might blink first. Her lips were slightly parted, her breath shallow. The fluorescent light above buzzed softly. She hadn't slept. What the hell was she doing? $5. A fake boyfriend. A stranger. A stranger who would meet her entire family in less than 48 hours. She splashed cold water on her face, then pressed a paper towel against her cheeks, trying to chase away the flush in her skin. It didn't help. Penny's was quiet that morning. The sky outside was pale, a soft blue fading into gray. Snow had stopped falling, but left everything dressed in white, clean, and brittle. Inside, the smell of bacon and fresh coffee filled the air. Claire moved behind the counter, grateful for the rhythm of morning. Pour, smile, refill, nod, write, move. Her body knew what to do, even if her brain didn't. It was 11:52 a.m. when she heard the bell above the door. He walked in like he belonged there, like this was something people did meet their fake girlfriends at greasy diners the day before Christmas Eve. James wore a dark wool coat, his scarf tucked neatly around his neck. His hair was slightly tousled, and he looked freshly shaven, like he'd actually prepared for this. Claire didn't know whether to be flattered or alarmed. He slid into a booth near the back, hands folded on the table. Claire took a breath and walked over. You're early. I was curious if you'd show. I said I would. James tilted his head. People say a lot of things they don't mean. She hesitated, then sat across from him. Coffee, yes, please. Claire poured 2 cups. He didn't touch his yet. He watched her. That apron suits you, he said. She raised a brow. Don't start. I wasn't flirting. You kind of were. He smiled faintly. Maybe I was. Claire sipped her coffee, needing something to focus on. The warmth didn't help the way his gaze made her skin feel. This was already complicated, and they hadn't even started pretending yet. James pulled a notepad from his coat pocket and slid it onto the table between them. A real notepad. Lined paper. Black ink. Bulleted lists. Okay, he said. Let's build a believable relationship. Claire blinked. You made a list. You said your family asks a lot of questions. She stared at the page. Questions were written out in careful handwriting. How did you meet? What's his job? First date. Pet peeves. Inside jokes. She almost laughed. You're really committed to this. You hired me for $5, and you'll get $5 worth of excellent performance. Claire leaned back in the booth. All right, let's get to it. We met 6 months ago. Where at the diner? He smiled. Of course. You used to come in for breakfast. Always ordered 2 eggs, wheat toast, and black coffee. His brows lifted. That's specific. It's what you actually ordered, she said before she could stop herself. James didn't reply right away. His eyes held hers, a quiet acknowledgement between them. He had come in before. She just hadn't realized she'd noticed. All right, he said softly. 6 months ago. I was a regular. You finally smiled at me one morning and I left my number on a napkin. Claire gave a short laugh. Okay, movie man, he shrugged. It's romantic. She looked away. And your job, are we sticking with school teacher? James hesitated. Yeah, that still works. You teach what history? Any siblings, one brother, lives in Chicago? We're not close. Claire scribbled it down. Pet peeves, people who talk during movies, or leave dishes in the sink overnight. Claire gave a sharp look. Don't come for me. James smiled wider. Duly noted. Inside joke. He tilted his head. We could say we have a thing about squirrels. Squirrels. You're terrified of them. I tease you about it. You claim they're plotting world domination. Claire laughed unexpectedly, and it echoed in the near-empty diner. Okay, that's good. That's actually good. The moment stretched. For a split second, it didn't feel like they were pretending. She sat back quieter now. You'll need to know my family. He listened carefully as she listed them, her mom, Gloria, over-involved, and Delicate, her sister. Sophie married smug beautiful, her Aunt Margot gossipy, persistent, and impossible to dodge. Her dad quiet lately, but kind. James took notes. He nodded thoughtfully, asked follow-up questions. What's your mom like when she's suspicious she bakes? Claire replied without hesitation. If she's suddenly offering you cinnamon rolls after dinner, something's off. He grinned. That's a solid warning. And if Aunt Margot corners you in the hallway, don't try to out-talk her. Just nod. She'll lose interest faster if you look bored. James leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. You've done this a lot, haven't you? Done what played defense. Protected yourself. Claire's chest tightened. She stared at her coffee, wishing it were stronger. I've had to, she said quietly. When you show up alone year after year, people stop asking if you're okay and start assuming you're not. The air between them shifted. Quieter. Heavier. James sat back, his voice softer now. I won't make things worse. She nodded. I believe that. They reviewed the rest of their story. Favorite shared movie, A Lie You've Got Mail, anniversary date, July 8th. Plans for New Year's, none. Claire found herself correcting his fake details like they mattered. Like this was a real thing worth getting right. When they were done, she slid the notepad back toward him. You're either very good at this, or this isn't your first time. James folded the paper and tucked it away. I've never done this before. Then why say yes? His expression changed. It wasn't a smile, not exactly, because you looked like someone who deserved one night without having to explain herself. Claire swallowed hard. She didn't know what to say to that. He stood slowly. Tomorrow night? I'll pick you up at 7. She nodded. He pulled a $5 bill from his coat pocket, folded it in half, and set it gently on the table. For authenticity, he said. Then he left the bell above the door ringing behind him like punctuation. Claire sat there a moment longer, heart louder than the music on the radio hands still wrapped around her cooling cup. This was supposed to be simple? It wasn't anymore. Claire stared at the $5 bill on the table long after James had walked out the door. There was something absurdly poetic about it, like the universe had finally decided to play along with one of her sarcastic remarks. She'd joked about needing a fake boyfriend, and somehow a stranger with a calm voice and expensive shoes had materialized in the cold to say, "Sure, I'll do it, for $5. But now it wasn't funny. Now it was real, a plan, a face, a ride at 7 tomorrow night. She picked up the bill, folded it into her wallet, and whispered, "This is insane." The diner had emptied by noon. Claire grabbed her bag from the back room and stepped out into the crisp afternoon, heading straight for the one person who wouldn't let her forget how insane this actually was. Ruthie was behind the counter at her bookstore, rearranging a display of holiday romances. She looked up as the doorbell jingled one eyebrow already raised. Oh no. That look. Did someone propose or die or both? Claire dropped her bag by the stool and sat with a dramatic sigh. I hired someone. Ruthie blinked. To kill Sophie. What no? Then what did you hire someone for? And why do I feel like I'm about to be your accomplice? Claire leaned forward, arms on the counter. A boyfriend, a fake one, for Christmas dinner. Ruthie's face didn't move. Say something, Claire muttered. I'm waiting for the punchline. There isn't one. Now Ruthie blinked slowly. You're serious? Claire nodded, lips pressed together like the shame was trying to escape. Ruthie set down the stack of books. Okay, start from the beginning. And if this ends with you in a trunk, I need to know where to start looking. Claire launched into it, the late-night walk, the lamplight, the notepad of backstory details, the $5 agreement. When she finished, Ruthie just stared. Then she exhaled. Claire, that's either the most desperate thing you've ever done or the most cinematic. Claire groaned, rubbing her forehead. Don't say cinematic. That makes it sound like I've lost my grip on reality. You hired a man named James to play your boyfriend for $5. Reality's already been voted off the island. Claire smirked in spite of herself. Ruthie leaned across the counter, lowering her voice. What does he want? He said. Nothing. Just wanted to help. People don't help for nothing. Claire paused. I don't know. He seems good, like unsettlingly good. Ruthie tilted her head. Is he handsome? Claire looked away, pretending to organize the sugar packets by the register. He's fine. Oh, that's a lie. He's just clean and tall, that's all. You've already memorized his hands, haven't you? Claire narrowed her eyes. Stop it. Okay, fine. So what's the plan? He picks me up tomorrow. We show up to dinner. Smile, nod, leave before anyone starts asking about weddings or baby names. Ruthie's tone softened. And what happens when it feels too good? Claire glanced up. It won't. You don't know that. Claire hesitated. That's the point. It's not supposed to be real. I just want one night where I'm not the cautionary tale in everyone's head. Ruthie studied her for a beat, then nodded slowly. Okay. But promise me something. What if it starts to feel real? Tell me, before it gets messy. Claire swallowed her throat dry. Deal. That night, back in her apartment, Claire stood in front of her closet. The dresses were all wrong, too bright, too stiff, too honest about the fact that she never went anywhere. She settled on a forest green sweater dress with sleeves that hugged just enough and boots that gave her 2 inches of bravery. Christmas Eve arrived cold and blue-skied. She spent the morning pretending it was just another day. Dusted the kitchen. Watered the half-alive plant in the window. Rewrapped her mother's bath oil set because the ribbon looked lazy. But by 6:50, her nerves had staged a full rebellion. At 7:00, sharp headlights swept across her living room wall. Claire opened the door before he could knock. James stood there holding a single poinsettia. "I thought flowers were expected." She blinked. "They're perfect." "You look great," he added, and not in the way people say it when they're just being polite. It was soft, almost surprised. "You clean up okay yourself?" she replied, voice steadier than she felt. They drove in silence for a few minutes. Claire fidgeted with her ring, then her sleeves. James finally spoke. "Want to go over our story one more time?" "No," she said. "If we rehearse too much, I'll sound rehearsed. Just follow my lead." He nodded. Claire's parents lived in a 2-story brick house just past Biltmore Village. The kind of home that had wind chimes on the porch and seasonal flags in the yard. Warm, proud, and too full of opinions. As they walked up the steps, James leaned close and whispered, "Just breathe." She gave him a look. "Are you coaching me now? Just being a good investment. $5 value and all." The door swung open before she could reply. Gloria Bennett stood there in a festive red apron, hands fluttering to her chest. "Claire." "Oh, you brought Oh My? Hello, Mom," Claire said, clearing her throat. "This is James." James stepped forward with the poinsettia. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Bennett." Gloria actually blushed. "Oh, please call me Gloria." Inside, the noise of dinner preparations and family chatter swirled. Claire spotted Sophie at the far end of the living room, her lips already pursed in suspicion. James whispered, "Your sister, welcome to the gauntlet," Claire replied under her breath. They stepped in. And just like that, the night began. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way. The house was humming with holiday cheer, but Claire felt like she'd walked into a stage set, one where every spotlight followed her. Every glance was a judgment wrapped in tinsel. She barely had time to take off her coat before Aunt Margot swooped in from the hallway like a hawk zeroing in on prey. Her lips were cranberry red and already pursed with curiosity. "Well, well, well." Margot sang, eyes trailing over James like he was a handbag she was trying to determine the value of. "Claire, you didn't mention your +1 had a jawline straight off a Hallmark card." James, to his credit, smiled warmly and extended a hand. "James." "Nice to meet you, Ms. Margot," she said, gripping his hand a little too long. "Claire's aunt, and unofficial family historian." Claire stepped between them. "We're going to hang our coats, Aunt Margot." "Oh, of course," Margot said, eyes twinkling with mischief. "But don't think you're escaping my questions. I've got eggnog and a chair with your name on it." They made it down the hallway, Claire leading James to the coat rack. Her hands trembled slightly as she fumbled with the buttons on her jacket. "She always like that?" James asked quietly. "Since birth," Claire muttered. "Just wait. Sophie hasn't even said hi yet." "Speak of the devil." Claire came her sister's voice, smooth and clipped as she approached. Sophie looked pristine in a cream turtleneck and pearl earrings, her blonde hair swept into a perfect twist. "Mom said you were bringing someone, but I thought she was hallucinating again," Sophie Claire replied, forcing a smile. "This is James." James extended his hand again. "Nice to meet you." Sophie shook it but kept her eyes locked on Claire. "Where did you two meet again?" "The diner." Claire answered. He kept ordering toast until I finally agreed to a date, James added, smiling at Claire with just enough warmth to make it look real. Sophie raised an eyebrow. How romantic. Before Claire could respond, Gloria called from the kitchen. Everyone, dinner's ready, let's gather. The dining room was glowing with candlelight and pine garland, the table set with red linen napkins, and the good china that only came out for holidays and funerals. Claire hadn't sat at that table in over a year. She took a breath and walked James to their seats. Her dad gave her a small nod from across the table, his eyes kind if a little distant. Claire felt a tiny thread of comfort tug loose from the knot in her chest. Dinner began the way it always did, everyone talking at once. Gloria passed the sweet potatoes, Margot dove into a story about a friend's scandalous second husband, and Sophie critiqued the green bean casserole like it personally offended her. Claire mostly listened, letting James take small bites and offer polite responses when spoken to. He was smooth, careful. Too careful. James, Margot said suddenly, her fork pausing in mid-air. What do you do for a living? Claire's stomach clenched. I teach high school history, James replied, meeting her gaze with the calm of someone reciting something memorized. Oh, Margot leaned in, always the bloodhound. Which school just outside Asheville? He said, keeping it vague. I'm between semesters right now. Margot narrowed her eyes. Interesting. My friend Nancy's son teaches at Reynolds High. Maybe you know him? Possibly, James said easily, sipping his water. Claire exhaled barely. Sophie cut in. That's a big change from your last boyfriend, Claire. What was his name again? Todd, Tommy, Claire corrected, trying not to snap. Right. Tommy, the one who fixed lawnmowers. Nice guy. He wasn't mine, Claire said, and James reached under the table, gently brushing his hand against hers. It wasn't romantic, it was grounding. A signal. I'm here, Gloria, clearly flustered by the tension, interjected. Well, I think it's just wonderful to see Claire happy again. Isn't it, George? Her father looked up, a small smile on his lips. Yeah, it is. Claire glanced at James, who gave her the smallest nod, and for a moment she let herself believe it. Then it happened. Grandma Ruth, quiet until now, lifted her glass of sparkling cider and squinted across the table. Her voice was slow, unsure. Have I seen you before, James? James looked at her kindly. I'm not sure. Maybe no, she said, her gaze sharpening slightly. Not here. On the television, I think. Or a magazine. A story, maybe. Something about computers. Claire froze. James chuckled softly, not missing a beat. I get that a lot. Guess I've got one of those faces. Ruth tilted her head, eyes still narrowed. Maybe she murmured. Or maybe I just remember more than I should. Silence followed just for a second. Then Margot burst into laughter. Oh, Ruth, you also thought the UPS guy was Elvis last month. Everyone chuckled nervously, and the moment moved on. But Claire noticed the way James's jaw tightened. Just slightly. His hand withdrew from hers under the table. And suddenly the lie felt heavier. After dessert pumpkin pie, which James claimed to love even though Claire had seen him barely touch it, they excused themselves to help clear the table. In the kitchen, Claire handed him a stack of plates. That was close. He glanced at her. She's sharp. For someone who thought the UPS guy was Elvis, she's not wrong that your face looks familiar. James looked away. I used to do some public speaking. Conferences, education boards. I probably showed up in a press photo or two. Claire didn't answer. She rinsed a plate, the water hissing into the sink. I'm not lying, he added. I didn't say you were. You're thinking it. Claire turned to face him. What am I supposed to think, James? You show up out of nowhere. You're too polished, too prepared. You make up stories like it's second nature. He held her gaze, something flickering behind his calm exterior. You hired me to play a role. I'm playing it well. Maybe too well. They stood there surrounded by the sounds of clinking forks and laughter from the other room. The weight of pretending pressed between them like another person. Claire lowered her voice. Why did you really say yes? James's eyes softened. Because I knew you weren't joking when you asked for help. And maybe I didn't want to spend Christmas alone either. She didn't know what to say to that. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, soft and slow, like the sky was trying to muffle the world. Claire looked at him, really looked, and for the first time the lie didn't feel like protection. It felt like a door they were both standing in front of, afraid to open. The night air bit at Claire's skin as she stepped out onto her parents' porch. The snow had eased into a fine mist, catching the warm glow of the porch lights, like glitter in the dark. She closed the door quietly behind her and exhaled, watching her breath disappear into the silence. James followed a few seconds later, pulling his coat tighter. They didn't speak at first. The sound of Christmas music and muffled laughter drifted from inside, soft and distant. Claire leaned against the wooden railing, arms crossed the sweater dress, doing little to block the chill. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching the same nothing. That went better than expected, James finally said. Claire let out a dry laugh. You mean, besides my grandma thinking she saw you on television and my aunt interviewing you like she's auditioning for Dateline? He smiled. Besides that, yes. She glanced at him. You held your own. I've sat through board meetings with billionaires who wanted to kill each other over which kind of cappuccino machine to order. Your family was oddly refreshing. Claire gave him a sideways look. Board meetings. He caught it just for a second and smiled like he'd stepped too close to something hot. I meant parent board, school stuff. Claire didn't press, not yet. But the moment lingered. The way he said billionaires, like someone who'd been in the room, not just reading about it. She looked back out at the street. They liked you. He leaned on the railing beside her. Did you? The question came too easily, like it had been waiting for permission. Claire paused. I'm not sure I know you well enough to like you. James tilted his head. But you trust me enough to walk me into your life and lie to the people who raised you. She turned toward him, slow. That wasn't about trust. That was survival. A beat passed. You're right, he said quietly. And for what it's worth, I think you survived beautifully. Claire looked away again. Her chest was tight, but not in the way it usually was. Not the anxious tightness of being seen as less than or falling short. This was something else. The kind that comes from being noticed, from being cared about. I should go, she said, even though she didn't move. It's late. I'll drive you. They rode in silence for the first few minutes, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Claire watched the snowfall through the passenger window. James drove with one hand on the wheel, his jaw relaxed, the streetlights passing over his face in soft amber strokes. You're good at pretending, she said softly. James didn't look at her. It's easier than explaining. Explaining what he exhaled through his nose, almost smiled. Everything. They pulled up outside her apartment. The porch light flickered as it always did, casting a weak yellow glow on the steps. James put the car in park, but didn't reach for the keys. Claire unbuckled her seatbelt slowly. You coming in? He looked at her. Do you want me to? She hesitated, then shook her head gently. No, not tonight. He nodded like he understood more than she said. She opened the door and stepped out, the cold snapping around her ankles. Before she closed it, she leaned back in. Thank you. For tonight. James held her gaze. Thank you for trusting me with it. Claire shut the door and walked slowly to her apartment key already in hand. She didn't look back until she reached the top step. The car was still there. Lights on, engine running. She paused, and then the car pulled away. Inside, she kicked off her boots, shrugged off the coat, and let her body fall onto the couch. The silence settled like dust. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her bag and saw a message from Ruthie. Well, Claire stared at it. Typed, deleted, typed again. It was perfect and awful at the same time. 3 dots appeared. Then, uh-oh. That means it worked. Claire didn't reply. The next morning she walked into Penny's for the early shift. The air smelled like maple syrup and burnt coffee, just the way it always did. She tied her apron and began refilling the creamers when the door opened. It wasn't James. It was Tommy. She froze. He looked almost the same worn Carhartt jacket beard, a little fuller eyes, soft and unsure. Hey, he said. Claire managed a nod. Hey. He rubbed the back of his neck. Ruthie said you brought someone to Christmas dinner. Claire blinked. Ruthie's got a big mouth. She said he looked like someone who reads books on purpose. Claire smirked. Maybe he does. Tommy leaned against the counter. So, is it serious? She met his eyes. It's real enough. He nodded slowly. I just wanted to say, I'm happy for you. You deserve someone good. Claire wasn't sure why her chest tightened at that. Tommy wasn't cruel. He never had been. Just easy, comfortable. But she knew deep down that if she'd stayed with him, she'd still be stuck. Still afraid to want more. Thanks, she said. Tommy pushed off the counter. Well, if you ever need your sink fixed again, I'll call a plumber. He grinned. That's fair. After he left, Claire stood still for a long moment, the coffee pot in her hand, her thoughts far away. By noon, her phone buzzed again. A message from James. I hope you survived the morning shift. I still owe you a proper first date, even if we met backwards. She read the message twice, then again. She didn't know what they were doing. But for once the question didn't scare her. It pulled her forward. Claire read the text again, her thumb hovering above the screen. I still owe you a proper first date, even if we met backwards. She smiled, despite herself, then typed, Does a diner breakfast count as a date if I'm wearing an apron and refilling coffee for strangers? A moment later, James replied, Only if the coffee's hot and you sit down for 5 minutes. Claire hesitated. Then tomorrow. 9 a.m. you sit at the counter. I'll bring the coffee. She hit send before she could overthink it. The next morning, the sky over Asheville was heavy with winter gray, the kind that blurred the line between morning and afternoon. Claire stepped into Penny's early, wrapped in a scarf and nerves. She didn't know what this was becoming, but she knew it wasn't nothing. By 8:45, she'd already checked her hair in the reflection of the pie case twice, and reapplied lip balm she'd never worn to work before. Ruthie would tease her for a year if she found out. At 9:01, James walked in. Not dressed up, not overdressed either. Just clean simple like someone who made the effort but didn't need the applause. His coat was unbuttoned, scarf loose, and he smiled when he saw her as if he'd been looking forward to this the whole time. Claire felt it in her stomach, low and surprising. Hey, she said, trying to sound normal. Hey, he said back, sliding onto the stool at the far end of the counter. She poured 2 coffees and walked over. So what's the difference between this and pretending in front of my entire family? James looked at her eyes, calm and clear. This time it's just us. She nodded, setting the cup in front of him, then sat across from him, apron still tied around her waist. Do you even like coffee? She asked. I like yours. Claire rolled her eyes but smiled anyway. You're dangerously good at this. At what? This. Saying the right thing. Making everything feel easy. He stirred his coffee with a slow hand. It's not always easy. But with you, I don't have to try so hard. Claire's stomach did that slow-turning thing again. She looked away, busying herself with a sugar packet. So, she said, now that Christmas dinner is behind us, what happens next? Do we declare the mission a success and go our separate ways? James paused. Is that what you want? Claire didn't answer right away. I don't know what I want, she admitted. But I know I don't want to keep pretending. He nodded slowly. Then let's stop pretending. She glanced up. It's not that simple. Maybe it is. She leaned forward, elbows on the counter. James, I've spent a long time building walls. Carefully. Brick by brick. I didn't think you could knock them down with $5 and a Christmas smile, but here we are. He didn't smile this time. I'm not here to knock anything down. I'm here if you decide you want to walk out from behind them. The quiet between them deepened, and just like that, the front door opened and in walked Sophie. Claire's heart sank like a stone. Sophie spotted them instantly. She was wearing yoga pants, no makeup, and a look that said she wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. Well, isn't this cozy? She said, sliding onto the stool next to James. Claire stiffened. Didn't know you were a regular now. Was just picking up something for Mom? Sophie looked at James. Good to see you again, James. Or should I say Mr. History Teacher? James stayed composed. Morning, Sophie. She tilted her head. You know, I looked up the faculty pages of all the schools around here. Couldn't find a James anywhere. Claire's jaw tightened. You did what I was curious, Sophie said innocently. It's not every day my sister shows up with a mystery man who answers every question a little too perfectly. James didn't flinch. I don't use my real last name at work. Oh, and what is your real last name? Sophie Claire warned. But Sophie leaned in. It's a fair question. I mean, we let you into our house, into our family dinner. I think we deserve to know who we were sharing the stuffing with. James set down his coffee. It's Whitaker. Claire's breath caught. Sophie blinked. Whitaker. Like Whitaker Technologies? James nodded once, calm, almost weary. Formerly, yes. Sophie's mouth dropped open, but she caught herself quickly. So, you're that James Whitaker. Claire stared at him speechless. Sophie gave a small, disbelieving laugh. Wow. So this whole fake boyfriend thing is actually some kind of tech mogul romance novel, Sophie Claire snapped. Enough! But Sophie stood grabbing her bag. No, it's fine. I just think it's wild that you walked into our Christmas with a secret billionaire and thought no one would notice. She turned to James. Good luck with her. And then she was gone. Claire stood too stunned to sit. Is that true? James looked up at her, something different in his eyes now, something more vulnerable than any lie could ever fake. It was. Was I walked away from all of it over a year ago? The company, the money, the name? I wanted a life that didn't cost me myself. Claire stared at him, her heart pounding in her ears. Why didn't you just tell me? Because the second people hear the name, they don't see me. They see numbers, or stories, or a fantasy. I didn't want to be that with you. I wanted to start at zero. She sank back onto the stool. Her hands trembled. You let me make you up. I didn't let you. I followed you, because it was the most honest thing either of us could do in that moment. Claire felt the ground shift beneath her. This wasn't a performance anymore. This was real. Messy. Unexpected. Real. She looked at him, and for the first time she saw all of it, his truth, his fear, and the way he'd chosen her world over the one he'd left behind. Why me? She whispered. James's voice was quiet. Because when you asked for help, you weren't asking for a savior. You were asking for someone to sit beside you. And I needed that too. Claire closed her eyes. This wasn't how she thought the truth would come out. But maybe, just maybe, it had come out exactly when it needed to. Claire didn't sleep that night. She lay on her couch, one arm over her eyes, replaying the moment over and over again. The diner. Sophie's voice. The way James said it was. Former billionaire, James Whittaker. Every magazine profile she'd ever glanced at while waiting in line at the grocery store, every clickbait headline she'd skipped past it, all hit differently now. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. It had been sitting across from her, sipping coffee with too much cream. And he hadn't told her. Not once. Not even after she let him into her home. Her story. Her Christmas. The trust she'd started to let grow, it cracked. By morning she had written and deleted 5 different messages. The 6th one she sent. I need space. Please respect that. He didn't reply, and somehow that made it worse. The next day at Penny's, everything felt louder. The coffee machine screamed. The bell above the door stabbed her nerves every time it rang. Even Ruthie, when she came in mid-morning for her usual chai latte, didn't speak right away. Claire poured her drink and slid it across the counter. Well, say it. Ruthie blinked. Say what you know what. I actually don't. Claire gritted her teeth. The James thing. The billionaire thing. The whole town probably knows by now. Sophie's probably mailing out flyers. Ruthie took a slow sip. You mad at him for being rich, or for not telling you? Claire stared at her. Both. That's fair, Ruthie said calmly. But can I say something, or will you throw a coffee pot at me? Claire gave a tight smile. Say it. Ruthie leaned in. He didn't have to come to Christmas. He didn't have to learn your entire family tree or pretend to love green bean casserole or get grilled by Sophie like he was on trial. But he did. And it didn't feel fake. Claire swallowed. He should have told me. Yeah, Ruthie said. But maybe he was trying to be known for something else for once. Claire looked down at the counter. Her hands were clenched. She exhaled. I thought I finally found someone who saw me. Not the version my family wants. Not the girl with the nice face and the empty bank account. Just me. Ruthie reached across and gently touched her hand. Maybe he did. And maybe he's scared you won't want him without all the pretending. Claire blinked. The idea struck somewhere raw. That night she didn't text him, but she didn't delete his number either. The next morning there was a knock at her door. Not a message, not a call. A knock. She froze hard in her throat. No one knocked anymore. Everyone texted, even her landlord. She opened the door slowly. James stood there holding 2 paper cups of coffee. No coat, no scarf, just him. His eyes were tired. His hair messy like he hadn't slept either. I know you said you wanted space, he said, but I didn't know if you meant forever or just long enough to breathe. Claire stepped outside, folding her arms against the cold. I didn't want to see you yet. I know. She stared at the cup. You brought coffee. I didn't know what else to bring. Flowers felt cheap. Apologies felt worse. Claire took the cup. Didn't drink it, just held it. James looked down. I should have told you who I was. She didn't respond. I thought if you knew you'd look at me different, like everyone else does. People stop talking like people when they know. They filter themselves. They put on airs. And I didn't want that with you. Claire's voice was tight. So instead you let me fall for a version of you that wasn't real. I didn't let you fall, he said quiet. I fell with you, and I wasn't pretending. Claire looked away, Her chest was tight, her hands frozen around the cup. "I didn't want a fairy tale, James. I wanted something real, and you—" Her voice cracked. "You were the first thing that felt like it could be." He stepped closer, careful. "It still can be." Claire shook her head. "Not if it starts with a lie." "It didn't start with a lie," he said. "It started with you asking for $5 worth of hope, and me stupidly thinking I could give that to you without screwing it up." She bit her lip hard. "You should go." He didn't move right away, just looked at her like he wanted to say something else. But he didn't. He nodded once, turned, and walked away. Claire didn't cry, not until the door was closed and locked, and even then it wasn't a dramatic sob. It was quiet, just a leak from the part of her heart she thought had finally stopped breaking. For the next 2 days, she didn't hear from him. She didn't expect to. But on the 3rd day, something arrived in the mail. A simple envelope, no name, just her address. Inside one photograph. It was her, from Christmas Eve. Laughing, mid-sentence, candlelight in her hair, looking across the table at James like he was the only person in the room. And on the back, his handwriting. "This is the moment I knew I was in trouble." Claire sat down slowly, the weight of the photo in her lap. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. From James. "I'll wait. If you ever want to ask me anything, I'll be where this all started." 7 p.m., Friday, the diner. Her heart twisted. This time the decision would be hers. Claire stood outside Penny's coat, zipped to her chin, the sky overhead shifting from gray to a deeper slate. The wind had picked up, pushing against her legs like it wanted her to turn around. Her hands were buried in her pockets, clutching the photograph James had sent like it was more fragile than it looked. "This is the moment I knew I was in trouble." She'd stared at those words for hours. Not because she didn't believe them, but because she did. And it scared her. Friday had come too quickly. Every day leading up to it had felt too fast and too slow, a tug of war between her pride and something deeper, more stubborn. She looked down the street. Pennies glowed ahead, frosted windows, string lights still clinging to the windows from the holidays. A flicker of warmth in the cold. She hadn't made up her mind until just now. Her feet moved. When she stepped inside, the bell above the door gave its usual cheerful chime, and the heat hit her like a wave. The diner was mostly empty, just a couple in a booth, and an older man reading a newspaper near the window. And at the counter, James, same stool as the first time, same quiet focus. He turned when the bell rang, and when he saw her, he stood. Slowly. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She didn't move closer yet. "I wasn't sure I'd come." "I wasn't sure either," he said. "But I hoped." Claire looked around. "Is this some kind of full circle thing for you? I guess I thought if there was going to be a conversation that mattered, it should happen where it started." She nodded, took a slow step forward. Then another. When she reached the counter, she set her purse down and slid onto the stool beside him. A beat passed. "You didn't text back," he said gently. "I didn't know what to say." "You don't owe me anything," James added. "I just wanted you to know the truth." Claire looked at him now. Really looked. I keep thinking, what if I'd never found out? Would you have ever told me yes? He said without hesitation. But I was waiting. I wanted to get to know you without all the noise. I wanted you to know me for me, not for the headlines, not for the bank account. And now I know that was selfish. Claire tilted her head. You think it was selfish to hold that part of myself back, to let you walk blind into something I knew had weight. She leaned on the counter, folding her hands together. Why did you really walk away from that life? James looked down at his coffee. It had gone cold. He didn't answer right away. Then, finally, softly, he said, "Because I didn't recognize myself anymore." Claire blinked. James kept going. "The company became something I didn't love. The people around me weren't there for me. They were there for what I gave them. The money, the access, the shine of being near success. And I stopped sleeping, stopped caring. I didn't lose everything. But I lost myself." He looked up at her. "And then one night, I was walking through this town I'd never meant to stay in, and I heard someone say they needed a fake boyfriend for Christmas. And it was the first time in a long time I wanted to be needed. Even if it wasn't real." Claire swallowed hard. Her voice came out quieter than she expected. "I wasn't supposed to be serious? I wasn't supposed to stay," James replied. They both laughed too softly, too painfully. She turned to face him. And now he looked at her. Really looked. "I'd like to start over. With the truth. No roles. No pretending." Claire took a breath. Then another. "Okay," she said. James blinked. "Okay, I'm not saying I'm ready for all of it, but I don't want to walk away from something just because it didn't begin perfectly." A slow smile pulled at his lips. Most things that matter never do. They sat in silence for a moment. The couple in the booth laughed quietly. The old man turned a page of his paper. Claire turned to him. "What's the one thing you're most afraid to tell me?" James raised an eyebrow. "Is this part of the reboot?" "It's part of the no-lies policy." He nodded slowly, then leaned in just slightly. "I'm afraid that I'll always be looking over my shoulder wondering when someone will stop seeing me and start seeing the version of me they want." Claire considered that. Then replied, "I'm afraid that no matter how much I give, it'll never feel like enough." They both sat with that. No fixing. No easy response. Just two people carrying their truths. James reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out, a tiny folded card. He slid it across the counter. Claire opened it. Inside was a gift card to the bookstore. Ruthie's shop. $50. She looked at him, confused. He grinned. "I figured you'd want to control your own happy ending." Claire laughed, an actual full laugh, and it broke the tension like sun through a cloud. Outside, snow had started again. A quiet, steady drift. James stood. "Can I walk you home?" She looked at him. "Only if you promise not to say anything perfect along the way." He smiled. "No promises." They walked out together. And for the first time, neither of them looked back. It had been 2 weeks since Claire and James had walked home from the diner that night. 2 weeks of trying to figure out what it meant to start again, not with a clean slate, but with an honest one. They didn't dive headfirst into anything. There were no sweeping declarations, no rushed promises. Instead, there were small things, quiet things. Texts in the morning, coffee dropped off at work, walks through the city when the stores had closed and the streets felt like they belonged just to them. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Claire liked real. That morning, Claire was running late to her shift at Penny's scarf half-tied and hair refusing to cooperate. She rounded the corner by the bookshop and nearly collided with Ruthie, who was carrying a box of used paperbacks stacked too high for her to see over. "Whoa, Claire, watch it!" Ruthie wobbled slightly but caught her balance. "Sorry," Claire grabbed one side of the box. "Why are you doing this alone?" "Because my intern called out with the flu and I overestimated how strong I am when caffeinated," Ruthie said, blowing a strand of hair out of her face. Claire took the whole box. "Where do you want it?" "Back room. You're a lifesaver." As they walked inside, Ruthie gave her a look. "You've been glowing lately, like full-on rom-com heroin glow. You getting enough sleep or just kissed stupid?" Claire rolled her eyes. "Both." "Maybe. So what's the deal with Mr. Christmas Billionaire now? Claire set the box down, gently, behind the counter. We're figuring it out, taking it slow. Ruthie leaned against the shelf, crossing her arms. You like him? Claire paused. Yeah, I do, and he likes you. Claire looked down at the stack of books. A used copy of A Wrinkle in Time sat on top. She touched it lightly. I think he really does. Then why do you look like someone just told you Santa's retiring? Claire hesitated. It's just... She sat on the edge of a stool. This thing with James? It doesn't live in my world. I mean, he's been to places I can't even pronounce. He ran a company that made more in a month than I'll make in a lifetime. I'm still behind on rent. Ruthie gave her a long look, and Claire sighed. And I keep waiting for the catch. Like one day he'll realize this whole thing was fun, but it doesn't fit into the life he actually wants. Ruthie walked over and sat beside her. Claire, people like James don't show up in your life to play pretend. They could date model CEOs, whoever they want. He chose you. And not because you're some underdog project, because you see him. The real him, not the name, not the story. Claire bit her lip. I'm scared, I know Ruthie said. But love that doesn't scare you a little isn't worth much. Claire smiled faintly. That sounds like something you read on a mug. Probably, but doesn't make it less true. Later that afternoon, Claire was cleaning up the dessert case when her phone buzzed. James, are you free tonight? She stared at it for a second, then typed back, depends. Are you asking as my fake boyfriend my real one, or the ex-CEO of a tech empire? He replied almost instantly, I was hoping as someone who wants to see you smile. Her heart tightened just a little. She replied, I'm off at 6. James, dress warm. I'm picking you up. At 6:05, he was outside in a beat-up truck that Claire was 90% sure wasn't really his. She slid into the passenger seat and eyed him. This is new. He grinned. Borrowed it from a guy at the co-op. We're going on an adventure. I should be worried, shouldn't I? Nope, just curious. They drove out of the city past the edge of downtown until the lights faded and the trees grew taller and closer. Claire pulled her coat tighter around her. The windows fogged slightly from their breath. 10 minutes later, James turned down a small gravel road and parked beside a snow-dusted cabin with strings of old lights hanging along the porch. The air smelled like pine and wood smoke. Claire stared out the window. Is this where you murder me? He laughed. Not tonight. They got out. He unlocked the cabin door, and warm light spilled into the cold. Inside the cabin was cozy and rustic wooden beams, a stone fireplace, 2 mugs already set on a side table, and a fire crackling like it had been waiting for them. Claire stepped in slowly, her boots tapping the wood floor. You've been here before, she said. James nodded. It's a place I come to when I need to remember why I left the noise. She turned to him. Why'd you bring me? He looked at her serious now, because I don't want to hide the parts of me that are real anymore. Not from you. Claire took a slow breath, the scent of cedar filling her lungs. You're doing a terrible job of being mysterious lately. Thank you, he said, grinning. They sat on the old couch, knees touching. He handed her a mug of cocoa, real cocoa, not the instant kind, and for a long time they just sat there watching the fire. James finally spoke. I want you to know something. Claire turned to him. I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm not testing this or treating it like some weird escape. I'm here, with you, because it feels right. And that's rare in my world. She stared at him, her eyes shimmering in the firelight. I'm scared it's too good, she said, like I'm going to wake up and realize it was just a really convincing dream. He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers. "Then let's keep proving it's real," he said. One small truth at a time. Claire leaned into his shoulder, heart thudding, the fire warming more than just the room. Outside, the wind had quieted. Inside, something new was beginning to feel safe. The snow had thickened overnight, blanketing the winding roads and rooftops in a quiet that only winter could create. Claire woke in the cabin to the smell of coffee and the soft hum of a record player spinning something old and gentle in the background. She wasn't sure what time it was, only that the light filtering through the windows had that soft golden tone that made everything feel slower, safer. She sat up on the small couch, pulling the throw blanket closer, still wrapped in the weight of last night, the firelight, James's voice. The quiet moments between them that said more than any grand gesture ever could. From the kitchen, he called morning sleepyhead. Claire smiled and followed the sound of his voice. James stood barefoot on the stone floor, wearing a long-sleeve tee and holding two mismatched mugs. The cabin's heater hummed gently behind him, and steam rose from the cups like they were in some kind of holiday postcard. He handed one to her. "Careful. It's hot." She took it, fingers brushing his. "You always make coffee like it's an art form," he smiled. "Only for people who matter." Claire took a sip and stared at him over the rim. Dangerous line. Honest one. They stood there in silence, just the two of them, and the wind brushing snowflakes across the window glass. Claire finally broke it. "Do you ever miss it?" James looked at her. "Miss what?" "The life you walked away from. The power. The control. The money." He thought for a moment, swirling the coffee in his mug. "I miss pieces of it. The building of something. The focus it gave me. But not the noise. Not the constant need to prove my worth with numbers. I got lost in that." She nodded. "And now?" "Now," he said softly, "I'm trying to find a life that doesn't require noise to feel full." Claire didn't respond right away. She just looked out the window at the snow piling along the deck railing. James's voice softened. "Can I ask you something?" She turned back to him. "What would your life look like if nothing was holding you back?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean if you didn't have to worry about rent bills, working 2 jobs just to stay above water, if the pressure was gone." "What would you do?" Claire stared into her cup. "I'd write," she said quietly. "I'd finish the short story collection I started 3 years ago. The one sitting half done in a drawer under my bed." James's expression warmed. "What's it about?" Claire laughed under her breath. "Love. Loss. Trying again. All the stuff I never had the guts to say out loud." "Then why haven't you?" "Because no one wants to read about a waitress from Asheville trying to figure herself out." "I do," James said. She looked up. "I mean it," he added. "Your story matters. Just because it doesn't come with a glossy cover or a flashy title doesn't make it any less worthy." Her eyes burned suddenly, tears pressing at the edges before she could stop them. She turned away. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "Saying exactly what I need to hear." James didn't move. "Maybe it's because I'm finally listening to what you're not saying." Claire stared at the fire for a long moment. "I'm scared, James." He nodded. "So am I. What if we're too different? What if this works for now, but later when things start getting real again, you decide this version of life is too small?" James stepped closer, placing his mug on the counter. "Then we talk about it. Then we decide together what version we want to build. But I'm not here to make your life bigger or fancier. I'm here because your world feels more true than anything I've built." Claire swallowed. "I've never had anyone choose me like this before." "Then let me keep choosing you, every day, until it stops feeling impossible. She looked up at him, tears threatening again. You're infuriating. I know. She laughed, breaking the tension just enough to breathe. Later they went outside, bundled in scarves and boots, walking through knee-deep snow that hadn't yet been touched. James pulled a sled from behind the cabin, something old and wooden, and clearly well used. Claire raised an eyebrow. Tell me you don't expect me to ride that thing down the hill. I'd never force you, he said, grinning. But I will absolutely go first and shame you with how fun it looks. He took off down the hill, with a whoop tumbling off the sled halfway with a puff of snow and laughter. Claire shook her head, arms crossed, watching from the top. He called up to her. Don't make me do this alone. She sighed. This is how people die in those viral videos. But she sat down, pushed off, and screamed all the way down. They landed in a pile together, snow in their hair cheeks burning from cold and adrenaline. Claire rolled onto her back, breathless. That she gasped was ridiculous. James looked over at her, his face close. And now you've lived. She stared at him, eyes soft. Yeah, she whispered. I think I have. He leaned in slow and unsure, giving her room to say no. She didn't. Their lips met with the gentleness of a first snowfall, slow, searching, real. When they pulled back, Claire rested her forehead against his. What happens now? James brushed a stray flake from her eyebrow. Now we go back inside, make grilled cheese, and keep figuring this out. She nodded. Okay. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't wonder if she was enough. She just was. And that was everything. Claire leaned against the kitchen counter in the cabin, watching the grilled cheese sizzle in the pan. The golden crust bubbled gently, filling the small space with the scent of butter and toasted bread. James sat nearby, flipping through one of the old books he'd pulled from the shelf earlier, but she could tell he wasn't really reading. His thumb stayed on the same page too long. She plated the sandwiches and set one in front of him, then took the seat across the table. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said, You ever think maybe some moments are too perfect? James looked up, his brows drawing slightly together. Too perfect. Yeah, like the universe is letting you borrow happiness for a minute. But you know there's a bill coming due. He set the book aside and leaned in. Claire, are you happy right now? She hesitated. Yes. Then let's stay here a little longer before we go looking for the catch. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. After dinner, they packed up and headed back into town. Claire sat in the passenger seat, face pressed to the cold window, watching the trees blur past in the headlights. The quiet between them was comfortable until her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. It was a message from Sophie. Call me. Now. Her stomach flipped. She didn't reply. Another message. It's about James. Claire's pulse spiked. She turned to look at him. He had one hand on the wheel, the other resting relaxed on his thigh. There was nothing in his face that told her something was wrong. But the tension in her chest was back. When he dropped her off at her place, she hesitated before getting out. Thanks for today, she said softly. James smiled. It was one of my favorites. She nodded, then got out, clutching her bag close. The cold bit into her cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the chill that slid down her spine as she walked up the steps to her apartment. Inside, she called Sophie. Her sister picked up on the first ring. Claire. Are you sitting down? Claire closed her eyes. Just say it. Sophie exhaled. I didn't go looking, I swear, but someone from our Christmas dinner posted a picture, just a casual family shot, and it somehow ended up in a gossip thread. Claire's heart sank. What kind of thread? The kind that talks about where James Whittaker disappeared to. The kind that compares photos. Claire, you're in it. Silence. I thought he walked away from all of that. Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sophie hesitated. Apparently not completely. There's a new startup. Stealth mode. Huge backing. Guess who's supposedly behind it? Claire's throat tightened. No. He told me he left that world. I'm not saying he lied, Sophie said gently. I'm saying maybe he didn't tell you everything. Claire sat down slowly, the weight of the call heavy on her chest. Her fingers trembled as she ended the call and opened her laptop. A quick search, a few clicks, and there it was. An article on a tech blog. Anonymous billionaire backs quiet startup in Asheville. No names, no confirmation, but speculation was everywhere. Photos, rumors, comments, and then a blurry shot of James leaving a co-working space. Last week. Claire stared at the screen. He hadn't said a word. All this time, and he still wasn't being fully honest. The tears came slower this time, not like before when everything felt raw and sudden. This was different. This was betrayal, wrapped in silence. The next morning, James texted her like nothing had changed. Morning. Want to meet at the bookstore later? I'll bring the coffee this time. Claire stared at the message, then at the article still open on her screen. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then she typed, "We need to talk." 3 words. All she could manage. James replied almost instantly. Of course. Same place. Claire didn't answer. She just got dressed, pulled her coat tight around her, and stepped out into the cold. Something had shifted. And this time she didn't know if it could be undone. The bookstore felt different that day. Claire stepped through the door and was greeted by the soft creak of the wooden floorboards and the familiar smell of old pages and fresh coffee from the corner cafe stand. Ruthie gave her a nod from behind the counter, but didn't say anything, just offered a knowing glance, and went back to shelving returns. James was already there, waiting. He stood in the back corner near the poetry section, 2 cups in hand, his back straight, but his eyes tired. When he saw Claire, his face lit up, but only for a second. He could tell. Something was wrong. Claire didn't smile. She walked toward him steady but silent, and took the coffee without thanks. James watched her carefully. You okay? She exhaled slowly. No, not really. He nodded, setting his own cup down on the small table beside them. I figured. She looked at him, eyes searching. Is it true he didn't ask what she meant? He just sat down. Yes. Claire sat across from him, crossing her arms tightly across her chest. So you were starting another company? Yes, he said again. But it's not what you think. Then tell me what it is, she said sharply. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been hiding a whole new life. Again. James leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I wasn't hiding it. I just wasn't ready to talk about it yet. Claire's jaw tightened. Do you hear yourself? That's exactly what you said last time. He winced. I know how it sounds. Then why didn't you tell me? Her voice cracked. You say you want something real. You say I matter. But how can I believe any of it when I keep finding out the truth from everyone except you? James swallowed. Because I was afraid. Because I didn't want to lose you. She stood abruptly, walking a few feet away, facing the tall bookshelf. You know, I spent so long convincing myself I was the one who wasn't enough, she said softly. Too normal. Too small town. Too ordinary. And then you show up and you make me believe I was seen. That I mattered not in spite of all of that, but because of it. James stood too. You do matter. She turned on him, eyes bright with unshed tears. Then why do you keep deciding what I can handle? Why do you keep thinking protecting me means keeping me in the dark? The question hung there. Heavy, unavoidable. I wanted to give you peace, he said finally. I didn't want this new thing, whatever it becomes, to change how we were learning to be with each other. Claire shook her head. But that's the thing, James. Relationships aren't about what we keep from each other. They're about what we're willing to carry together. And you never gave me the chance to carry this with you. He took a step closer. It's not just a company. It's different this time. It's small, intentional, built around values that matter to me now. I didn't want it to be another empire. I wanted it to be mine. Quietly, and I thought, if I told you too soon, maybe you'd think I hadn't changed at all. She stared at him. And maybe I would have. But you didn't give me the chance to decide that. They stood in silence, the soft buzz of the store around them, pages turning hushed conversation, the clink of coffee mugs. James ran a hand through his hair. I messed this up. Claire didn't say anything. I should have trusted you more, believed in us more. Still, she said nothing. He looked at her, something raw in his voice now. But I haven't stopped thinking about you since the first moment we met. And I'd give everything I have again if it meant keeping this. Claire looked down, her voice barely audible. I don't want to keep something that's always half in shadow. James stepped forward. Then I'll bring it all into the light. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is the investor sheet, he said. For the new company. My name's not on it publicly yet, but this is everything. The structure, the team, the goals. I want you to know it. All of it. She hesitated, then took it. I'm not asking you to be impressed, he added. I'm asking you to be part of the truth. Claire held the paper tightly. I need time, she said finally. I'll wait, James replied. Even if it's never. I'll wait. She didn't cry this time, but her heart cracked in a way that told her it wasn't over. It was just unfinished, and sometimes that was the most honest kind of chapter there was. The investor sheet sat untouched on Claire's kitchen table for 3 days. 3 long, restless days, where her eyes kept drifting toward it, where her fingers grazed the corner absent-mindedly while sipping coffee, but she never unfolded it. Not yet. Not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much. And when you've been hurt by someone you started to trust, the scariest thing isn't the lie, it's what the truth might do to your heart if you let it back in. Ruthie stopped by on the 4th day with her usual brash energy and a cinnamon roll the size of a small plate. You look like someone trapped in an indie movie soundtrack, she said, plopping onto Claire's couch and kicking her boots off. Claire raised an eyebrow. Thanks. I think. Ruthie pointed her coffee at the paper. Is that it? Claire nodded. Did you read it? No. Why not? Claire sank into the armchair. Because I'm not sure what it'll mean if I do. Ruthie softened. You're allowed to be scared, Claire. But if you're not willing to open the door, how will you know if what's waiting on the other side is real? Claire looked down at the paper again. After Ruthie left, the apartment was too quiet. She stared at the ceiling, then the walls, then the paper. Finally, she sat at the table, unfolded it, and began to read. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't filled with bold predictions or buzzwords. It was simple, clean, clear. A purpose-driven tech project centered around transparency, digital literacy, and equitable access, fewer investors, capped profit margins, a team composed mostly of underrepresented voices from smaller cities, not Silicon Valley. And at the bottom, a note in James's handwriting. You said you didn't want a version of me hidden in shadows. So here's the version that wants to build something better, not just out there, but with you. Claire blinked fast. That night, she didn't sleep. The next morning, she called him. He answered on the first ring. "Hi," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "Hi." I read it. He didn't rush her, just waited. "I don't know what I expected," she said. But that wasn't it. "I didn't want to build another empire," he said softly. "I wanted to build something that reflects the version of myself I only found after I met you." She swallowed hard. "James, I know I hurt you," he said, "and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness just because I handed over a document. But I want to earn it. Not with words. With time. With showing up." Claire hesitated. "I'm not ready to just fall back into everything. I'm not asking you to," he said. "I'm just asking to see you. Tonight. No pressure. No fixing. Just two people figuring out if the story's still worth telling." Claire closed her eyes. "Okay. Where?" He paused. "The cabin. If it's not too much." She considered. The cabin, where everything had started to feel real. "Okay," she whispered. She arrived just after sunset, the snow packed down from earlier drifts. The porch lights flickered in welcome, and when she stepped inside, James was already there, setting logs in the fireplace, soft jazz humming from the old radio. He stood when she walked in, but didn't rush her. Didn't speak. She stepped closer. Looked around. Everything looked the same. But it felt different now. "You didn't change anything," she said. "I wanted it to be familiar," he replied. "Like before everything got complicated." Claire sat on the edge of the couch. "You were right, you know." James frowned slightly. "About what you told me once, that you were afraid people would stop seeing you and start seeing what they wanted from you." She looked at him, really looked. "And I think I did that too. I wanted you to be the person who helped me feel safe, seen. But I didn't give you space to still be messy, still figuring things out." He stepped closer, cautiously. "Claire, I'm still hurt," she admitted, still unsure. "But I miss you, and I miss this." James knelt in front of her, not touching, just holding her gaze. "Then let's start here," he said. "No promises, just the truth." Claire nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "Start with this. What scares you right now?" James smiled faintly. "That I'll get one more moment like this, and mess it up again." She took a shaky breath. "Mine's that I'll never stop guarding my heart long enough to let something real stay." They sat there close, but not touching, with the fire crackling between them. The moment didn't solve everything, but it cracked the door open. And this time neither of them looked away. The fire had burned low, throwing soft shadows across the worn floorboards of the cabin. Claire and James sat quietly, the silence no longer heavy with doubt, but gentle like the moment before a song begins. Claire pulled her knees up onto the couch, wrapping her arms around them. "It's strange," she said, her voice low, "how sometimes it takes walking away to see someone clearly." James sat on the rug near the fireplace. Legs crossed a blanket draped over his shoulders. "I saw you clearly from the start. But I didn't know how to let you see all of me." She gave him a look. "You still don't have to do everything alone, James. That's not strength, that's fear." He exhaled. "You're right." There was something different about him tonight. Not polished or in control, but grounded. Present. He wasn't trying to fix anything. He was just there, and that mattered more than any apology. Claire stood and walked to the small window overlooking the snowy trees. "You know what I realized?" she asked, staring out at the night. James waited. "I've spent most of my life thinking love had to come with conditions, like I had to earn it by being the least complicated version of myself, the easiest, the most agreeable." She turned back to him. "But the love I want now, the kind that lasts, it's built on being known. Fully. not just the parts that make someone feel good about choosing you. James stood slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Then let me know you. All of you. Claire crossed her arms, holding herself. Even the parts that get scared and stubborn, the ones that overthink every word you say, especially those he said gently, because that's where the real person lives. A beat passed. Then another. She stepped closer. I don't need you to give up your world to be in mine, James. I just need to know you're not using my world as an escape from yours. I'm not, he said. I'm here because I've never felt more myself than when I'm with you. And I don't want to disappear into another boardroom or headline. I want to build something quiet, something real, something that looks a lot like this. Claire looked around the crackling fire, the worn books, the half-drunk mugs of tea. This is enough for you, she asked, almost disbelieving. He nodded. It is now. A quiet laugh escaped her, shaky but sincere. You really are the strangest man I've ever met. I get that a lot. They sat down again, side by side this time. Their shoulders touched, then leaned together. James looked at her expression, softening. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think we have a shot at this? Not just the romance part, but the partnership. Claire didn't answer right away. She reached out and took his hand. I think if we keep showing up like this, with honesty, with grace, we have more than a shot. James held her gaze. I want to show up. Every day. They sat like that for a while, the fire painting gold across their faces, no longer afraid of the silence between them. After a while, Claire leaned her head on his shoulder. I never imagined this would be my life, she murmured. Neither did I, he said. But I think maybe it's the one we needed. The snow continued falling outside, blanketing the world in quiet promise. Inside, two people once, from opposite ends of everything, began to write the next part of their story. Not from a place of fantasy, but from something better. Truth. Spring came slowly that year. The last patches of snow clung to shaded corners of the Blue Ridge Mountains, but the light had shifted warmer, softer golden, in a way that made everything feel like it was waking up. Claire stepped out onto the porch of the bookstore cafe, a fresh mug of coffee warming her hands, and looked down the street at the Saturday crowd rolling in like clockwork. This had become her ritual. Mornings here, pages written in the quiet upstairs nook, life finally feeling like her own. James had kept his word. He showed up, not with grand gestures or promises he couldn't keep, but with presence. Patience. Quiet acts of care that whispered, I'm still here even when the days felt too long or uncertain. It took time, it took work, but they were still choosing each other. Claire sat at the small patio table as James rounded the corner carrying a paper bag from the local bakery. He spotted her and raised it with a grin. You have no idea how hard I fought a tourist dad for the last chocolate croissant. She smiled. Did you win? I let his daughter guilt me into surrender. But I got you the raspberry one. Even better. He handed it over and sat beside her, stretching out his legs with a tired sigh. Remind me again why we agreed to sponsor the town's spring fair booth, because Ruthie dared us and I have an ego problem. He laughed. Right. And because you're secretly competitive. She nudged his knee. Don't act like you didn't love helping the kids make bookmarks yesterday. I did. He took a sip of her coffee without asking, then added, I haven't laughed that hard in a long time. Claire leaned back in her chair, the breeze lifting a few strands of hair from her face. You know, I think I finally believe you. He looked over. Believe what? That this version of life is real. That it's not some temporary escape from the world you came from. James turned serious, nodding. It is real. More real than anything I've built before. She studied him. Do you ever miss it? That other life. He paused. I miss the part of me that thought success had to look a certain way. I don't miss the way it made me feel hollow. Claire glanced at the bakery bag, then at him. Do you think people change, or do they just remember who they were before the world told them who to be? He thought for a moment. I think the best people do both. She smiled softly. He reached across the table and took her hand. You know what I've realized, he said. What that love isn't about finding someone who fits perfectly into your life. It's about finding someone who makes you want to reshape your life, even when it's uncomfortable. Claire's eyes stung just a little. Not because you lose yourself, he continued, but because you finally understand what it means to be seen. To be safe. She blinked quickly, then laughed. You always know how to ruin my mascara. He grinned. Occupational hazard. They sat in silence for a while, hands entwined, watching the town wake up around them. Later that afternoon, Claire joined Sophie and Ruthie at the spring fair booth, helping kids paint watercolor bookmarks and dodging the occasional splash. James handed out lemonade from the booth next door, his charm in full swing, offering seconds to anyone who made Claire smile. It wasn't the life either of them expected, but it was the life they were building. Together. That night back at the cabin, Claire unpacked her writing bag and pulled out the draft she'd been working on. The short story collection was nearly done. A publisher in Raleigh had shown interest, not because of who she was dating, but because the stories made people feel something. James brought her tea, kissed the top of her head, and sat beside her in companionable silence. As the fire flickered low, Claire whispered, Do you remember when I told you I was scared? He nodded eyes on her. I still am, sometimes, she said. But now, I'm also hopeful. James reached for her hand, brushing his thumb gently across her knuckles. Hope is the bravest thing we can hold on to. And she believed him. Fully. Finally. Outside, spring bloomed quiet and slow, like love learning to take root. And inside, two people who had every reason to give up kept choosing each other. Again and again. Not because it was easy, but because it was real.